So we have established that you want more, you deserve more, and you should have more joy. You should have more, but more joy specifically is what we're going after, right? So the last bit of context and conversation we're going to have is what is blocking us from having more joy currently, and what are we going to do to fix it before we jump right directly into the exercises. So the main thing that is keeping all of us from having more joy is that we are looking for it on the outside. We are looking for outside causes to stimulate our joy and to bring us joyful experiences. If I get this job, then I'll be happy. If I get this amount of money, if I pay off this debt, if I marry this type of person, if my kids do this, if my spouse acts like that, if so-and-so gets elected, if all these different things happen outside of us, then we think we will arrive at a place of joy. Now, we know really, if we think about it, it's not true. How many people have we seen become rich and famous and win lottery and all kinds of things, and yet had no peace and had no joy? But yet we continue to try to convince ourselves that joy is outside of us. So that's one of the things we're going to work on changing for sure. And we really need to work on changing that because we can't control things outside of us. You can't control who gets elected. Sure, you can vote. You can't control the economy. You can't control your spouse. You can't control your kids. You can't control your boss. You can't control the corporation you work for, your customers. All these things outside of our control are the things that we're trying to look for our happiness, but they're out of our control. So it's kind of silly that we do that, that we place that power for our joy and our happiness in other people's hands. Don't do that. Let's not do that. So I think a good analogy that I'm going to use throughout the program, and I want you to get in your head because I think it helps paint a picture, is we're going to talk about it like a sailboat. And part of the other reason is, selfishly, I've been into sailboats the last couple of years. You'll soon see me on one. But you're kind of like a sailboat with your sail up, but you're just being pushed by wherever the wind blows. So the economy blows this direction and your work blows this direction, and somebody cuts you off in traffic and you react to that, and you react to your spouse and you react to your boss, and all these things are happening. They just push you wherever they are going, whatever direction is going, and you're just constantly reacting and having no control, but being pushed by these outside influences, just like a sailboat with no captain. So we can't control all these outside experiences that are happening to us, but we can set the sail of our minds. We can become captain of our own ship and set the sail so that no matter what direction the winds push or the storms come, we control the direction that we are going, regardless of outside experiences, outside winds blowing to us. We are setting the course. That is why I love that analogy. We get to set the sail of our mind and our body and our responses. There is a technique in sailing I've learned as I've been studying how to steer a sailboat. That think about this. So it doesn't matter if I'm trying to go from Los Angeles to Hawaii. It takes about 2 or 3 weeks to sail there on a small sailboat, depending upon the weather and the wind. And notice I used something with 2 or 3 weeks, just like this course. See what I did there? But it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to sail to Hawaii, depending on the wind. But the sailor does not control the wind or the storms, the weather, obviously any of that. He has to continue going, I guess that would be due west, regardless of the wind. So if the wind's coming from the north, he has to set his sail that it keeps pushing him west. If it's coming from behind him, the east, then it pushes him that way. If it's coming from the south, he has to set the sail another way to keep moving due west. Think about this. Even if the wind is going east directly at him, there is a technique called tacking, where they kind of go this way for a while, the wind pushing, and then they have to turn the sail and go this way. So they're not able to go in a straight line because that wind is coming directly at them. But by tacking back and forth, they continue to make progress towards the goal of West and Hawaii. And that is no matter what is coming at us in life, if we set ourselves correctly, we can continue to respond accordingly and move towards the goal and the object of goal, or the goal of joy, or the object of joy, or whatever else we have set our intention on moving towards. We are in control of that regardless of the outside circumstances. So how do we do that? So first of all, let's address what is most common advice I think that people are given, and I've tried, right? First, I've always tried to will my way through stuff, force it, right? I'm just going to make a decision and will. And there is something to be said of willpower, and there is something to be said of making a firm decision and making better choices. But it's so hard to try to make better choices and then will your way through it when you haven't changed the programming. You haven't changed what's going on inside. You haven't changed your identity. You haven't given yourself the proper tools to be able to do that. It's very hard and exhausting just to try to will yourself through something. And if we go back again to the sailor analogy, you're in a boat alone, a small sailboat, and the storm is coming or the wind is blowing the wrong way. You can't just will yourself through it, right? You have to have the right techniques, the right tools to be able to do it. Just willing yourself won't. A second option that many of us choose, in good ways and bad ways, medical ways and unprofessional ways, is medicate, right? So we try to escape the pain, the frustration, the stress by drinking, by smoking marijuana, by taking Xanax or some Zoloft or some prescription pill for us. And not saying those things don't have their place, but that doesn't solve our problem, correct? Going back to the sailor analogy, we're in this boat, a storm is coming, we are stressed out. How do we fix it? Man, I'm just going to drink or smoke or take the Xanny and wake up tomorrow and deal with it. At least for tonight, I don't have to live in fear of the storm and panic, so I'm just going to escape. But first of all, wherever the wind blows that night while we're out of it, we're going to end up way off course. Tomorrow we wake up and we're in a worse position than we were, and we still are trying to get west to Hawaii. So medicating it isn't always a great solution. I've tried that as well. You try to avoid triggers. Well, don't get around anything that stresses you out or triggers you, and you got to cut these people out of your life, and you got to do all these things to avoid triggers. But really, I mean, can you avoid life? How do you, unless you join a monastery or an ashram, it's going to be very difficult to avoid triggers or things that upset you. I just don't know how you can avoid life. You want to be able to handle whatever's happening in your life, not avoid it or hide from it. I've been told, well, you're just going to have to learn to live with it. It's the card you were dealt. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? But so you're in a sailboat, the sail's up, the wind's coming, the storm's coming, and you're just like, the boat was given to me. Wherever the wind pushes me, I just have to deal with it. It's not a good philosophy. I don't like that, though I've used it at times. I said, well, it's just the hand I was dealt. So what do we do? The most common advice isn't working for us. It hasn't for me. One of the first things that we want to do is we are going to take extreme ownership and get a hold of the tools that allow us to respond accordingly and not react. Reacting is the boat being pushed by the wind and nobody is guiding it. Responding is I am assessing what direction the wind is coming, what kind of weather I have, and setting up my mind and body and emotions to react accordingly. I choose the response. I am responsible for everything in my life. That's going to be tough for some of you in the beginning. I'm not going to get into it in depth, not in this course. That's probably something for an advanced teaching, but I want to plant the seed right now as we move forward. I am responsible for everything in the world. I am responsible for it. I have the ability to respond. That is what responsible means. I have the ability to respond to everything that comes into my life in the world. I am responsible for everything. We will move on before I go too deep into that. So probably the biggest trouble we have is Our mind is like a CPU, a computer, a tool that was given to us for us to use. Our body is a tool like a car or a spacesuit, if you will, that was given to us to use. We have been allowing the wind to blow on our mind and body, and these things react and make all the decisions and control. Our thoughts are running us. Our body is running us. Our cravings for sugar tell us when to snack. Our minds and emotions tell us when to be upset and when to lash out and when to go quiet and when to cry and all these other things. But these were tools that were given to us that we were supposed to steer. We were supposed to use. So the routine that we're going to go through in the mornings is set up to help us accomplish setting our own self, taking back control of these things, taking back ownership of these things. So let's talk about what they are a little bit and put them in context. We're going to do a breathing exercise that raises our energy very powerfully right out of bed. You need to have control over your own energy. If you're tired and lethargic and exhausted and dependent upon coffee, you're never going to get anything done. Don't you want to have more energy? We all want more energy, right? So we got to lift that energy. And we are going to do that in a 30-second breathing exercise. You're going to be blown away. The second thing we're going to focus on is straightening the spine. And we're going to do an exercise that helps us straighten the spine. Now, before you go anywhere, don't get lost on me. Listen to this, please. There is a Harvard study. I'm just going to give you one sample. You can look it up, and it's like the Superman pose. So if you stand in this pose where your chest puffed out and your hands on your hip and your head's up high, kind of like the Wonder Woman or Superman stance, and you hold that pose, the study showed, for 3 minutes, I believe it was, you have an increase in testosterone by 20% just from holding a pose. So when I tell you that a certain body position or working the spine a certain way can change us biochemically, science has proved that. It also, that stance, lowered cortisol. Remember what we said in the last video about cortisol and how too much is bad? So we want to be able to do these things. So it's not absurd when I say that we're going to work on the spine, just a few minutes of getting that spine functioning correctly. It's super important to our biochemical makeup as well, as far as seeking joy and being productive. A couple other points on this. 80% of Americans are experiencing some type of back pain or issue, right? Low back problems, different stuff. 80%. So, this first round, there's about 20 of you enrolled in this video course. I mean, 16 of you probably or more are dealing with that if the statistics are right. So having back problems, we need to work on the spine. I definitely did. That's something I neglected in the beginning. A misaligned spine, even a little bit, affects breathing patterns. You're going to see as you go, if you continue on beyond this course into some more advanced courses, you're also going to see the importance of breathing and breath work and breathing patterns. But if your spine's misaligned, your breath can be out of whack. And you can imagine how many problems that can cause. A stressed spine is a inflamed spine impacts our ability for communication to travel up and down through that channel of our spine where our central nervous system is, because it swells and the tube gets tighter and stuff doesn't flow as well. It doesn't transmit as well, the signals between the brain and the rest of the body. We want to make sure we work on that. Working on the spine is about working on posture. We already talked about the Superman stance. But other things too, your posture affects your biochemical and your mindset. If somebody's sad because their head's leaning forward and their shoulders are slumped. And if you sit this way, it's the opposite of the Superman stance. You'll start getting tired. You'll start maybe feeling a little down. And if you stand this way and up, so your posture has something to do with it. And all of us hunched over keyboards and everything we do sitting all day, but we really need to work on that for a million different reasons. We are also going to do a mindfulness exercise that's going to help us become more aware of who we are. We are spirit. I don't think any of you would argue this point. We are spirit or we are consciousness if you're science-based and not faith-based. So we are a spirit or a soul that is inhabiting a body, or we are consciousness that is inhabiting this brain and this body. And even scientists will admit they know consciousness exists, but they don't know what it is. So that's one of the things, like when we start talking about AI and singularity, where would consciousness come from if it comes into robots and artificial intelligence? Because we don't understand even how we have it. But I think all of us would agree that we are either spirit or consciousness or both that is inhabiting a body. So the exercise is going to help us take on that identity and to see the brain and the body as tools that we, the spirit, the consciousness, use, and not the other way around. We will be training the brain to find good things with a gratitude practice. There is something in the mind called the reticular activating system. And when you begin to train the brain to go looking for something, to search for something, that something is important, then it creates filters and just always begins to scan and find that thing for you. It is amazing. There's so many ways we can talk about how it's happened to you when we get into that portion of the training. It's already working on your behalf, good or bad, but it will do that. We're going to train the brain to go and to find good things. This is one of the most life-changing things I've ever done. It has absolutely revolutionized my life, my gratitude practice. I can't wait to share it with you. I'm really excited about that. So in the next video, we finally start jumping into the exact exercises and how to perform them. Let's jump to it.